Hello, hello. Here we are in Chapter 8. Chapter 8 covers meetings. So we'll talk about how to both attend and conduct an effective meeting. So in order to do that, first of all, we're going to talk about the types of meetings. Then we're going to talk about when to hold a meeting. Then we'll transition to planning a meeting, so creating an agenda. And then finally, conducting a meeting. So first of all here, we'll talk about kind of the logistics of meetings. So meetings are very common, and I'm going to use a statistic from our text, actually the opening statistic from our text, to illustrate how common meetings actually are in the workplace. So our text says, meetings are a fact of life on the job. Between 11 million and 20 million business meetings take place each day in the United States. Guys, again, that's between 11 million and 20 million in the U.S. each day. A typical American employee will attend 62 meetings per month at an average length of 31 to 60 minutes per meeting. Perhaps even more astonishing is the fact that CEOs spend 60% of their working hours in meetings. Another 25% of their time is devoted to phone calls, conference calls, and events. So the average American 62 meetings per month, that's like 2 meetings per day, and the length is 21 to 60 minutes. So we're in meetings on average for at least an hour to 2 hours each day if we on average have 2 meetings each day. So that is a lot of time that we are devoting in our day, and we need them to be as effective as possible. So the next bullet here is that meetings are costly, and I'm going to shift over here to a meeting calculator so that we can see exactly how costly on average meetings are in the workplace. So guys, this is the meeting cost calculator on Harvard Business Review. So we're going to call our meeting here business meeting. And then based on our text, we know that meetings are between about probably a half hour to an hour. So we'll say our meeting is 45 minutes long, and we'll say that we have 5 people attending the meeting. So the salary of person 1, we could say might be $40,000. The person 2 might also be $40,000. Then we might have a higher up exec here that makes 60. Then we might have another person up there that's a little higher up, and they make 80. And then our head person here is going to make $100,000 a year. And so there we can see that the meeting cost for 45 minutes of that day is $168 just for the company to host that meeting. And then we know that typically each employee is attending at least 2 meetings per day. So this is calculating their time based on their salary. So we can see there that meetings are costly. And then we transition here to the next bullet that says that meetings are not always productive. And I think we can all adhere to that at some point in our lives where we've been in a meeting where we're not really sure why we're there, or it's very disorganized, and we don't get to the point, or we don't effectively solve a problem or come to a conclusion, create a plan, whatever the meeting is for. Maybe we don't even get there. So they're not always productive, and we'll talk about ways to make them as productive as possible. On the other hand, guys, meetings contribute to an organization's culture. So if meetings are run well and meetings are productive, then people are likely to really prepare for meetings, and those meetings will help to accomplish goals. And as our text says here, meetings can leave employees feeling energized and excited about their work. They are a crucial part of a productive business culture. But we know there's always a converse to that if our company doesn't structure the meeting culture effectively. So then we'll go into the types of meetings, the first of which is information sharing. So if you think about a hospital, for instance, nurses are always making shift changes where they have to relay information about their patients to the next nurse coming in to take over. So that would be an information sharing type of meeting. You'll also always have safety meetings or protocol type of meetings in the workplace as well, and that's another example of an information sharing meeting. Then we have problem-solving or decision-making meetings, and these are the most common meetings in the workplace. So our text says, in other meetings, a team may decide to take some action or make a change in existing policies or procedures. With which supplier should we contract? Should we introduce a new product line? Should we delay production so we can work out a design flaw in our new keyboard, etc.? So problem solving is the most common reason, again, why business meetings are being held. Coming to those conclusions, working together, those two minds are greater than one, that brainstorming process in order to get through challenges on the day-to-day basis. Then also ritual activities. Ritual activities and ritual type meetings are often for a social function, so creating that collaboration within your team, within your company, and then showing belonging and importance, so kind of the perks that come with the job. So I encourage you to always attend social functions outside of working hours, because that's communication and those relationships that you're building in those social functions really carry over to your business day, and make all of those other meetings go a little bit smoother, and you get to know every facet of people's personality as well. And then showing belonging and importance, so perks. Oftentimes you'll hear of people golfing during their work day, and they're actually still having a meeting, right? And they're getting something accomplished, oftentimes maybe more effectively than in like a corporate sit-down type of meeting. And that's just a perk of the job, being able to go and do that with your clients, maybe offering your clients baseball tickets, something like that. So those are ritual activities that still serve a very important meeting function in the workplace. Guys, also this up-and-coming type of meeting is virtual meetings, which we are using in our class. And you can do teleconferences, which is like phone calls with a large group of people, or you can do video conferences like groups, Skypes, Zoom, those kinds of things. And guys, those are very helpful, especially for time constraints, distance constraints, anything like that, this can help bridge the gap in other communication styles or channels that may be a bit lacking. So virtual meetings are on the rise, but they do create their own unique set of challenges, right? We have to have the technology down pat, we have to have good professional backgrounds, we have to be able to present ourselves well in that virtual format. So with practice, virtual meetings are very, very effective, but they can also be disastrous if we're not really set up and really planned in the type of meeting that we're going to host, and if everybody isn't on the same page for those meetings. All right, so now we'll shift into planning the meeting and knowing all facets of that process here. So guys, when thinking about holding a meeting, we need to think about why we shouldn't hold a meeting first, and then decide if it is appropriate to hold a meeting. So thinking, the matter could be effectively handled over the phone, so maybe it's just a quick phone call to one or two people, and you don't really need to gather the whole crew. You could achieve the goal with a memo or an email, so always we want to choose the most effective channel of communication. Key people are not available to attend, so maybe you need to hold off on the meeting. The subject would be considered trivial by many of the participants. We've all been there. There is not enough time to handle the business at hand, so then you need to come up with another plan. Members are not prepared, and that can partly, as we'll talk about here in a second, fall on the shoulders of the person hosting the meeting, so giving them enough time to gather all the information that they're going to need. The meeting is just routine and there is no compelling reason to meet. Guys, if I were to guess, I would think that that is likely the case of those millions of meetings that are held every day, just that they are routine check-ins. But we really want to make sure that there's some meat and some substance provided in our meetings. The job can be handled just as well by one or more people without the need to consult others. And your mind is made up or you have already made the decision. So if that's the case, we don't need to hold a meeting. Conversely, when to hold a meeting is the task is beyond one person's ability. A job might be too much for one person to handle for two reasons. First, it might call for more information than any single person can possess, so maybe you need to call in some experts or various departments at your company. And then second, a job might take more time than one person has available. So you might need to distribute tasks and share within a team, a department, or a group. The next consideration here for when to hold a meeting is interdependent tasks. So this is where each group member is reliant on the success of the other group members in order to reach the common goal, and therefore you need to meet with each other in order to make sure that you are all on the same page and that each piece fits together and creates that puzzle. So you're putting together the puzzle pieces there. And your text also talks about where people with the similar functions in a company or a school, for example, maybe have annual, quarterly, monthly meetings where they're coming together just to discuss kind of how their job is going or takes on different things in the job, and then you can really get a feel for how other people are doing things and possibly improve what you're doing as well. So another kind of take on interdependent tasks there. So when to hold a meeting, the task is beyond one person's capacity and you are relying on one another to complete a project or achieve a goal. Also, we'll go on here a little bit further. More than one decision or solution is up for grabs here. So your text says, questions that have only one right answer are not well suited to discussions and meetings, right? There's hardly anything to discuss. So if there's a lot of different options, or maybe, for example, you've gotten bids on a project and you need to discuss which one the group or team thinks is the wise choice. You're likely to have misunderstandings or reservations is another point for when to hold a meeting. And guys, I think it's best to, if you can, have a virtual meeting where you can see each other's facial expressions, so that video conferencing, or be face-to-face in these kinds of meetings, just so you can read people's nonverbals and make sure that you are addressing any concerns or hesitations towards the topic in the meeting. And if they have reservations, then you can be very open and address any questions and have that conversational feel to the meeting. So another instance where holding a meeting might be beneficial. The next piece in planning a meeting, after we've selected that we actually do need that meeting, is setting an agenda. We need to make sure that all the topics covered in the meeting are well planned out, even that we have time frames for each thing on the agenda. And that the agenda is sent out to everyone before the meeting. So I've been to meetings before where they hand out the agenda as you're sitting down at the meeting, and that gives the attendees very little time to prepare for the meeting, if at all. So it's great to have the agenda probably 24 hours in advance, if not more, so that people can prepare the information, brainstorm a little bit, and come to the meeting with their ideas and thoughts ready to roll. So again, setting the agenda is very important, thinking of the topics that you need to cover in the meeting, and questions to ask yourself as you are creating this agenda is, what tasks do we need to accomplish in the meeting? What important conversations do we need to have, whether it's relating back to the previous meeting, continuing that conversation, or starting a new conversation? And you need information to begin. So that's likely referring back to the previous meeting and reviewing what you've come up with so far so that everybody remembers everything well and is on the same page before you start introducing those new ideas and accomplishing those various tasks you've set forth. So I've hit on this a little bit, but agenda items, we need to know the time of the meeting. So especially in the United States, we are very time oriented, right? So we need to know when we need to be there, and we need to know when the meeting is going to end so that other things can be scheduled throughout the day, right? So it's respectful that we set a time, we know the length of the meeting, we know the location of the meeting, likely we know how many people will be attending. As the person setting up the meeting, you obviously need to have the logistics set out where you have enough chairs for everybody. Are you having lunch? All those things need to be prepared, and then the information needs to be shared with the attendees prior to the meeting. You also need to, again, gather that background information, especially if it's a very new meeting and you haven't met with these particular people before. You need to have all your ducks in a row there with any background information you need to share. In terms of other agenda items, you need to have the items on the agenda and the goals. So you want to have results-oriented, specific, and realistic goals on your agenda. So one example that our text provides here is saying a general topic could be discuss the website redesign. So that's a little bit vague. We don't know exactly what we're supposed to be doing in terms of that agenda item. But if we made it more action-based and specific, we could say choose the design that best represents our company's image and has greatest functionality. Other examples that I have are I have a weekly newspaper meeting. I'm the online editor for a newspaper, and we have weekly meetings where we discuss assignments for stories and any projects that need to be completed. So an action item there on the agenda might be something like, today we are going to assign Jen 3 sports stories for the upcoming week's edition. Another one might be discuss 3 separate areas that we wish to improve on our website in terms of design, in terms of contact information, and in terms of e-subscriptions. So then we at least have the topic areas that we want to go into, and we can go from there. So being specific, being realistic, is it something that can be accomplished in that meeting? And is it results oriented? Are we actually going to get something out of that item? Then we'll also talk about pre-meeting work here and in this chapter. And our text says pre-meeting work helps ensure that the time spent in a meeting is focused and productive. So I talked about this a little bit already. We wanted to send copies of the agenda to the attendees in advance and give them time to really formulate ideas and bring everything that they need to the meeting. Okay guys, I also think it's very helpful to think about your meeting in 3 parts here. So the first, you're going to open the meeting, you're going to start to create the tone of the meeting, establish the etiquette of the meeting, so the practices, communication practices within the meeting, giving them an overview how the meeting is going to be run, what topics are going to be covered, and then likely reviewing the previous meeting so that you can set the background of information. Then you're going to get into that difficult business, likely some problem solving and some decision making where you're going to need a lot of collaboration there. And then lastly, you're going to end the meeting with some decompression, some easier items, maybe reviewing, setting the topics for the next meeting, and then closing out that particular meeting. So here's some examples of agendas. So here is a more, I would say, vague agenda where you have a welcome, and see this time is done well, kind of breaking out what is going to come when. But I do think that these items could be very much more specific and action-oriented. So for example, this one says athletic equipment status. So what are we just looking into the status? Are we checking up on the status? Do we need to make more orders? What is going on with the status, right? We need a little bit more information there. Park leadership changeover from county to city. I would say we need some more specifics. When is that happening? What specifically? There's a lot that goes into leadership. So making that, again, more action-oriented. What are we doing with that there, and a little bit more specific. This one says free organic seeds available. So does that mean we're giving them away? How are we promoting the seeds? Okay, so there is some of the critiques that I would have about this agenda. I mean, there are great things. We know who is talking. We know the items, all that good stuff. We have some contact information here, but I think it can be a little bit better. And here's another example of how we can do this. So it says the person responsible, it has a due date, it has what we need to do to prepare for the meeting, what we need to bring, the time, the place, everything, the call-in code if this is online. And then the agenda items here, other notes and information. So this would be a great template if you're just getting started in preparing meetings. Again, thinking of those action verbs, what you actually want from the people, the attendees of your meeting, and thinking about the outcomes that you are trying to achieve. So in actually conducting the meeting, the beginning here, we'll get a bit more specific. We want to identify the goals of the meeting, provide again that background, show how the group can be beneficial to accomplishing your goals, preview what actually is to come in the agenda, and then identify any time constraints you're going to have in that meeting or in the process of that problem solving or the timeline of things you're discussing. Participation here, we can get people to participate in two main ways. And guys, you'll find that you'll have people that are always talking in the meetings, and then you'll have people that are a little bit quieter, a little bit more reserved. And that's just natural, I think, with personality, and we want to make sure that we are hearing everybody. So the goal of the person organizing the meeting is to make sure that all opinions are heard and everybody feels welcome in that setting. But also, kind of a hierarchical problem in meetings is that people that are higher up in the business probably have more knowledge and they are sharing that more verbosely. But we also include everyone in the meeting for a reason, and we want to know everybody's opinion because they likely see the problem differently from their position in the company, or in regards to a certain problem, for example. So you can use the nominal group technique here. Your text talks about the nominal group technique pretty intensely, and I think it's pretty interesting here. So this is, I'll refer to it as NGT here, and researchers have found that NGT generates a larger number of high-quality suggestions than brainstorming. It also helps to prevent groupthink that we learned about in our last chapters. So the name of the method suggests that for much of this process, the participants are a group in name only because they are working independently. So each member anonymously writes down his or her ideas, which then the discussion leader collects, and all ideas are posted for every member to see. So maybe you post them in a PowerPoint, or maybe you're just taping them up on a wall so that everybody can go and glance by and see all the brainstorming. It's important there that we're not putting any judgment towards what we see on the brainstorming. We're just looking at what everybody has offered. Members discuss the ideas to better understand them. Again here, but criticism is prohibited. The goal is to clarify the possibilities, not to evaluate them. Then each member privately rank orders the idea from most to least promising. And then the group critically and thoroughly discusses those items that receive the greatest number of votes. So a cool process there to encourage participation for everybody. And then you can see if this starts to go well, that people will be more motivated to attend the meetings and to really prepare for those meetings. Another way to garner participation is to have members take turns. So you pose a question or a challenge to the group, and then you ask each individual person to provide their thoughts and responses. Alright guys, that's all we have to discuss for Chapter 8. I remember going to all of the club meetings and extracurricular meetings and group meetings that you had in college. So I hope that these tips and content will help you in preparing and conducting those meetings going forward. And then also both in structuring meetings and attending meetings in the workplace. So I'll talk to you guys soon. Email with any questions.